The Galactic Consortium had standards, principles, and an absolutely insufferable superiority complex that had developed over roughly 12,000 years of interspecies cooperation. Well, cooperation, if you defined the term loosely enough to include thinly veiled domination by the elder races, who'd figured out faster-than-light travel, while Earth's dominant species was still debating whether fire was a neat party trick or something worth pursuing seriously. The addition of humans to this illustrious collection of evolved beings had been, to put it in the diplomatic phrasing of consortium archives, a clerical error of unprecedented proportions. Less diplomatic species called it that Time Administrator Zilvik got spectacularly drunk on fermented Terran apple juice and approved first contact about 3 centuries too early. Humans, naturally, called it their big break. The Interstellar Defense Academy stood as the consortium's pride and joy, a gleaming monument to collaborative military excellence, where the brightest tactical minds from 237 species trained to protect galactic civilization from threats both external and internal. Its spires of impossible geometry stretched above the atmosphere of Nexus Prime, deliberately intimidating and accidentally phallic from most angles. A fact that human cadets found endlessly amusing and absolutely nobody else understood. The Academy's acceptance rate hovered at 0.03%, making it statistically more difficult to enter than to survive being spaced without a suit. Yet somehow, humans kept getting in. Not many. Just enough to be annoying. Physiologically unsuitable for extended space combat, read most of their evaluation reports. Lacks redundant organ systems, complained the medical staff. Inexplicably fragile skeletal structure, noted the combat instructors. Persistently cheerful despite constant failure, observed the psychological profilers with growing concern. Yet here they were, those bizarre bipeds with their confusing idioms and their ridiculous tendency to survive things that should, by all reasonable biological standards, kill them instantly. The consortium's greatest scientific minds had developed elaborate theories about human endurance, ranging from statistical anomalies to possibly immune to probability itself. The truth was far simpler and infinitely more terrifying. Humans were spite with legs. When Instructor X Chalvik, a 16-limbed tactical genius from the methane swamps of Rigel 9, explained that humans would never achieve the reflexes necessary for advanced combat maneuvers, 3 human cadets broke both Academy records and several bones, proving him wrong the very next day. When the Directorate declared human visual processing inadequately developed for precision targeting, a human with corrective lenses outshot every other species in her class, then suggested they might want to recalibrate their testing parameters. The Academy grudgingly adjusted to their presence with the enthusiasm of someone discovering an infestation of particularly determined mold. Humans were tolerated, occasionally respected, but never quite understood by their alien peers. And that suited the humans just fine. Being underestimated was practically a tactical advantage at this point. Little did the consortium know they were about to receive yet another lesson in why making assumptions about humans was a spectacularly bad idea. One that would involve a chest wound, 23 seconds of confusion, and the kind of misunderstanding that would reshape galactic politics for centuries to come. Cadet First Class H-42J, or Jamie, to the 3 other humans at the Academy, had the remarkable distinction of being completely unremarkable. In a species already considered the cosmic equivalent of participation trophy recipients, she managed to be exceptionally average. Her physical stats placed her squarely in the middle range for humans. 172 centimeters tall, 68 kilograms, with muscle density that made the avian Pelrosi cadets snicker behind their beaks and the silicon-based Drovnok shake their crystalline heads in something approximating pity. Her academic performance was similarly middle of the road, earning her the devastating Academy classification of adequately competent, which was inscribed on her identification badge in 3 languages and universal symbology. The Academy's xenobiologists had catalogued her as a standard human female specimen with no notable adaptations or advantages, which was their polite way of saying she was about as interesting as unbuttered toast. What they failed to note, because it didn't show up on their scans, was her absolutely staggering capacity for both sarcasm and spite, 2 human traits the consortium had yet to properly classify as psychological weapons. "Your endocrine system appears to be malfunctioning again," observed her roommate, a gelatinous Melbari who communicated through color patterns and had never quite grasped the concept of emotional privacy. Your face is displaying the red pigmentation that indicates either embarrassment or rage. Which is it? Neither. I'm just thinking about tactics class tomorrow, Jamie replied with a smile that any human would recognize as dangerously forced. The Melbari rippled skeptically. Curious. Your species' inability to control autonomic responses seems like a significant evolutionary oversight. Jamie didn't bother explaining that the flush in her cheeks wasn't an involuntary response, but the physical manifestation of her mentally calculating how many more days until graduation. The consortium species had many admirable qualities, but understanding the nuances of human determination wasn't among them. They mistook human sleep for a vulnerability rather than a tactical reset. They interpreted human emotional displays as weakness rather than pressure valves. Most critically, they failed to comprehend that human social bonding, that bizarre tendency to form attachments to anything from other species to cleaning robots, wasn't a liability, but the very source of their inexplicable resilience. As Jamie stared at the ceiling of her quarters that night, mentally reviewing combat protocols while her alien classmates assumed she was simply unconscious, she reflected on tomorrow's advanced training exercise with a mixture of anticipation and calculation that would have alarmed her instructors had they been capable of detecting it. The Academy's Simulation Chamber 17 had been programmed for what the curriculum euphemistically called extreme environmental adversity training, which was administrator speak for let's see who breaks first. Today's particular flavor of adversity, a neutron star's gravity well combined with atmospheric toxins and randomly generated hostile entities. Just another Tuesday in humanity's ongoing audition for galactic respectability. Cadets will demonstrate crisis response protocols under conditions exceeding standard survival parameters, announced Senior Combat Instructor Vraxnor, his 4 primary eyes blinking in sequence while his secondary visual organs remained fixed on his datapad. The Heshtari instructor's scaled exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber's lights, polished to a shine that suggested either exceptional personal grooming habits or, more likely, exceptional personal vanity. Vraxnor's rise through academy ranks had been meteoric, propelled by both genuine tactical brilliance and an uncanny ability to take credit for his subordinates' achievements. His antipathy toward human cadets was legendary, though he insisted it was merely objective assessment of physiological limitations. The fact that 2 humans had previously outperformed his expectations and therefore damaged his pristine reputation for predictive accuracy was purely coincidental to his dislike of the species. Purely. Each cadet will face individualized challenges calibrated to species-specific capabilities, Vraxnor continued, his secondary mouthparts clicking in what humans had learned to recognize as smug satisfaction. The chamber will adjust difficulty dynamically based on performance metrics. Translation: fail fast enough and the simulation might take pity on you. Jamie stood at attention among 23 other final-year cadets representing 17 species, all arranged in a perfect geometric formation that somehow managed to place her directly in Vraxnor's line of sight. Not coincidence. Cadet H-42J, Vraxnor's primary voice resonated while his secondary vocal apparatus whispered something that made nearby Heshtari cadets twitch their antennae in amusement. You will demonstrate the evacuation protocol for Class 7 gravitational anomalies. A murmur rippled through the formation. Class 7 was typically reserved for species with natural gravitational resistance or technological augmentation, neither of which humans possessed. Sir, Jamie responded with flawless protocol. Standard human training limits gravitational stress to Class 5. Are you questioning instruction, Cadet? Vraxnor's scales flushed a threatening crimson. No, sir. Requesting clarification of parameters, sir. Parameters are as stated, unless, his mandibles clicked in what passed for a Heshtari smile, you wish to invoke Article 12 and withdraw from the exercise, citing biological inadequacy. Article 12, the Academy's version of surrender, would mean automatic demotion and potentially expulsion. No human had ever invoked it. The unspoken agreement among human cadets: better to fail spectacularly than surrender preemptively. No, sir. Ready for assignment, sir. The chamber doors sealed with a pneumatic hiss that sounded suspiciously like laughter. Today's exercise carries additional stakes, Vraxnor announced. The Consortium Evaluation Committee is monitoring all final year performances for potential officer placement. Top performers will be considered for prestigious postings aboard the new Vanguard-class vessels. The Vanguard fleet, cutting-edge ships assigned to first contact scenarios and unexplored sector reconnaissance. Career-making assignments that no human had ever received. As cadets dispersed to their simulation pods, Vraxnor's primary eyes narrowed at Jamie. Cadet H-42J, you've been reassigned to Simulation Pod 23. There was a calibration issue with your original assignment. Pod 23, the farthest from emergency protocols, the closest to the chamber's central gravitational generator, and coincidentally, the pod that had experienced technical malfunctions during 3 previous exercises involving human cadets. Jamie's face remained expressionless as she saluted. Understood, sir. Any other parameters I should be aware of? Just one, Vraxnor replied. Try not to die too quickly. It disrupts the data collection. Simulation Pod 23 hummed with barely contained energy as Jamie stepped inside. The interior walls shimmered with active holographic matrices, currently dormant but ready to generate any of 17,000 environmental scenarios. The gravitational generator beneath the floor emitted a low-frequency vibration that humans couldn't hear but could definitely feel. A sensation not unlike standing on a subwoofer playing a bass note from hell. Calibration complete. Initiating Class 7 gravitational anomaly simulation in 3, 2. The pod's AI had a pleasant, almost soothing voice, the kind that could politely inform you of your imminent molecular disassembly while making it sound like a spa treatment. The floor lurched. Jamie's knees buckled as her body suddenly weighed 3 times normal, then 4, then 6. Standard procedure, activate personal gravitational dampener. Jamie's hand moved to her belt only to find an empty clip where the device should have been. Through the rapidly darkening edges of her vision, she glimpsed Vraxnor outside the pod, observing through the transparent section with 3 of his 4 primary eyes while the 4th monitored a control panel. His scales rippled in a pattern that translated roughly to unexpected equipment malfunction. How unfortunate. The gravity increased again. Jamie's ribs creaked. Blood vessels in her eyes began to rupture, turning her vision crimson. Her heart strained to pump against the crushing pressure. Sir, one of the Melbari instructors had noticed the readings. Pod 23 is exceeding safety protocols. The human cadet's vitals are a momentary calibration surge, Vraxnor responded dismissively. The system will self-correct. It didn't. Instead, as Jamie collapsed to her knees, the pod's secondary defense system activated, supposedly triggered by her aggressive movement. A security turret deployed from the ceiling, designed to fire non-lethal suppression rounds during combat scenarios, except the round that struck her directly in the chest was decidedly not non-lethal. The impact knocked her backward. A bloom of red expanded across her uniform as she crumpled to the floor. Through the pod's observation window, the assembled aliens reacted according to their nature. The empathic species recoiled in horror. The pragmatic ones simply logged the incident. Vraxnor's scales flushed with the deep crimson of satisfaction, poorly disguised as concern. Medical emergency in Simulation Pod 23, he announced with textbook precision. Cadet down, initiate recovery protocol. But no one moved immediately. The Academy's medical response team, accustomed to dealing with species possessing redundant organs and regenerative capabilities, calculated that the human was already beyond saving. The pod's sensors confirmed 0 movement, declining vital signs, and then, finally, flatline. Time of death, 14:27 and 36 seconds. Galactic Standard, 14:27 and 36 seconds. The medical monitoring system confirmed cardiac arrest and broadcast the flatline tone that transcended species barriers, the universal sound of a life ending. 127 and 37 seconds. Vraxnor began dictating the incident report, his secondary vocal apparatus already composing phrases like unfortunate equipment malfunction and inherent physiological vulnerabilities. 14:27 and 38 seconds. The Melbari instructor initiated emergency shutdown protocols for Pod 23, their gelatinous form pulsing with distress patterns. 14:27 and 39 seconds. 3 different monitoring systems detected an anomaly, a microscopic electrical impulse where there should have been none. The reading was automatically filtered as instrument error. 14:27 and 41 seconds. The Academy's AI system, processing at quantum speeds, flagged the incident for review but calculated a 0.003% probability of survivability based on wound characteristics and human physiological data. It diverted resources to more pressing matters. 14:27 and 43 seconds. A Pelrosi cadet with enhanced visual capabilities noticed something odd through the pod's observation window. The pool of blood spreading beneath the human's body was moving in a pattern inconsistent with gravity. Nobody asked, so nobody knew. 14:27 and 45 seconds. The pod's internal sensors registered a 0.3-degree temperature increase. The system attributed this to standard cooling procedures after lifeform termination. 14:27 and 47 seconds. Braxnor's primary eyes focused on his data display while his secondary eyes remained fixed on the fallen human. Something about the blood pattern triggered an ancient predator instinct, a warning sense that prey might not be as dead as it appeared. 14:27 and 49 seconds. The Heshtari instructor dismissed the feeling as primitive biological residue, irrelevant to the sophisticated modern being he considered himself to be. 14:27 and 51 seconds. The medical team finally arrived at Pod 23, moving with the unhurried efficiency of professionals who knew they were retrieving a corpse rather than saving a life. 14:27 and 53 seconds. A quantum fluctuation rippled through the simulation chamber's systems, causing microsecond power fluctuations. The backup systems attributed this to gravitational generator feedback. 14:27 and 55 seconds. Several observing cadets began to drift away, the human's death already categorized and filed in their minds as an unfortunate statistic, confirming what everyone knew about fragile species. 14:27 and 57 seconds. The pod's door mechanism activated without command input. System diagnostics initiated an automatic security scan for unauthorized access. 14:27 and 58 seconds. Braxnor's scales bristled in a pattern indicating confusion, tinged with the first hint of concern. "Delay medical retrieval," he ordered suddenly. "Something is..." 14:27 and 59 seconds. The pod's interior lights flickered. The medical team hesitated at the entrance, sensors detecting an electromagnetic anomaly emanating from the human corpse. 14:28 and 0 seconds. Complete systems failure cascaded through Pod 23. Emergency lighting activated, bathing the interior in a red glow that made the pool of blood appear black. Throughout the chamber, conversations halted mid-syllable. Training exercises froze in suspended animation. Even the Academy's perpetually humming systems seemed to hold their breath. In the sudden silence, the sound that followed, a wet, sliding, ripping noise, accompanied by something between a laugh and a gasp, would feature prominently in the nightmares of 17 different species for decades to come. 14:28 and 1 second. Movement detected in Pod 23. 14:28 and 2 seconds. The pod door slid open. The figure that emerged from Pod 23 bore only a passing resemblance to the human cadet who had entered it less than 5 minutes earlier. Jamie stood, impossibly, undeniably stood, in the doorway, illuminated from behind by the pod's emergency lighting in a way that transformed her silhouette into something ancient and primal. Blood soaked her uniform from collar to waist, a glistening wetness that caught the light and threw it back in crimson reflections. It dripped from her fingertips, creating a steady patter against the immaculate floor. Her hair, previously regulation perfect, now hung in dark, matted strands around a face that seemed simultaneously familiar and utterly foreign. But it was what she carried that turned the room into a tableau of frozen horror. In her right hand, held by what appeared to be circuitry and wiring rather than hair, dangled Braxnor's head. Not his actual biological head, which was still very much attached to his body and currently cycling through colors indicating extreme distress, but the processing core of his personal command unit, the brain that controlled his armor systems, database access, and communication networks. The dripping wet orb of technology pulsed with failing lights, occasional sparks jumping between exposed connections where it had been forcibly separated from its housing. A thin trail of coolant fluid dripped from severed tubes, mixing with the human blood to create a sizzling puddle on the floor. Jamie took one step forward, then another. Her movements were smooth, controlled, betraying none of the trauma her body had just endured. The medical team scrambled backward, instruments registering vital signs that should have been impossible: elevated but stable heart rate, regulated breathing, clear brain activity. "Impossible," whispered the Melbari instructor, their entire forms cycling through distress colors so rapidly they appeared to be strobing. Jamie's eyes found Vraxnor, who had backed against a control panel, all four primary eyes wide with an emotion humans would recognize as fear, but his species would never admit to experiencing. "I believe," Jamie said in a voice that sounded like someone gargling gravel and honey simultaneously, "this belongs to you, instructor." She hefted the dripping command unit. "Though it seems to have developed some performance issues," she tossed the unit toward him with casual precision. It landed at his feet with a wet thud that echoed through the silent chamber. "Your simulation parameters were interesting," she continued, swiping a hand across her blood-soaked chest where the projectile had entered. The fabric parted to reveal not a gaping wound, but smoothly sealed flesh with a fading red mark. "But I found them somewhat lacking in imagination. Perhaps next time try a Class 8. A low, bubbling sound emerged from her. It took the assembled aliens several seconds to recognize it as laughter. The Pelrosi cadet's feathers stood on end. The silicon-based Drovnak vibrated at frequencies indicating extreme distress. Even the normally unflappable Heshtari students had backed against the far wall, instinctively putting distance between themselves and the blood-covered human. "How?" The question finally broke from Vraxnor's primary vocal apparatus while his secondary mouth remained frozen in shock. Jamie's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Didn't anyone tell you? Humans have this funny little adaptation, something about—" She tapped her chest thoughtfully, leaving a perfect bloody fingerprint over her heart. "Extreme environmental resilience." She stepped fully into the light, and the assembled Academy members finally saw the full extent of her condition. Blood covered nearly every inch of her, but it was moving, sliding across her skin in patterns that defied gravity, collecting in symmetrical formations before dispersing again. "Now then," Jamie said, straightening her ruined uniform with meticulous precision, "I believe the exercise is incomplete. Shall we continue with the evaluation, or would you prefer to record this as another equipment malfunction?" No one answered. No one could. The Academy's emergency protocols activated with spectacular efficiency, just 23 minutes too late to be remotely useful. Security personnel surrounded the simulation chamber. Medical specialists from 17 species stood by with equipment calibrated for everything from silicon-based life forms to methane breathers. The Academy director himself, a being of pure energy contained in an exosuit of impossible technology, hovered at the periphery of the gathered crowd. Jamie sat calmly in the debriefing chamber, still covered in drying blood that continued to behave in ways blood simply shouldn't. Occasionally, droplets would rise from her skin, hover momentarily, then reabsorb into her uniform. "Perhaps," suggested the director's modulated voice, "you could explain what occurred in Simulation Pod 23. "Certainly," Jamie replied with the polite deference of a cadet addressing a superior officer, as if she weren't sitting there looking like the aftermath of a slaughterhouse explosion. "I was shot in the chest with a modified anti-material round that should have killed me instantly. Instead, it triggered my emergency nanite deployment." The assembled aliens exchanged glances of confusion. "Your what?" The director's energy form pulsed with incredulity. "My emergency nanite deployment," Jamie repeated slowly, as if explaining basic arithmetic to particularly dense children. "All human cadets at the Academy are equipped with them. Standard procedure for any species with insufficient natural defensive capabilities, as per Regulation 5291B. The Drovnak administrator hurriedly accessed the regulation database, crystalline appendages clicking across holographic controls. Regulation 52991B states that species classified as Category 3 or below on the biological resilience scale may augment natural capabilities with approved technological adaptations during Academy training. "Precisely," Jamie nodded. "Humans are Category 2.7, but..." The Melbari instructor's colors shifted in patterns indicating deep confusion. Human cadets have never registered as having technological augmentation during standard scans. Jamie's smile was cold as space. That's because our nanites are organic-based, genetically engineered hemocyte modifications specifically designed to be indistinguishable from normal human blood cells until activated by trauma. They're literally in our blood. The revelation rippled through the room like a shockwave. The implications were staggering. Every drop of blood from every minor training injury, every skin cell shed in the Academy's halls, every human cadet who had passed through their doors had been carrying microscopically disguised technology. And the command unit? Raxnor asked from where he stood, scales still fluctuating between the colors for anger and fear. Ah, that. Jamie glanced at the ruined technology now sealed in a containment field. When the nanites deployed to repair the damage to my chest, they identified the source of the attack. Following standard defense protocols, they neutralized the threat, which happened to be your override command unit that had disabled the safety protocols and loaded live ammunition into the security turret. She tapped her temple lightly. The nanites accessed my implanted knowledge database, another adaptation you never bothered to scan for, and identified that your command unit was remotely connected to Pod 23's systems. They followed the connection, disabled your firewalls, and extracted the unit while I was being repaired. That's impossible, whispered a Heshtari technician. The command unit was physically inside Instructor Vraxnor's armor. Was it? Jamie raised an eyebrow. Or was that just another projection? The nanites can manipulate matter on a quantum level. Creating a temporary passage between 2 points is basic functionality. The Academy Director's energy form flickered rapidly, their species equivalent of a stunned blink. Why were we never informed of these capabilities? Jamie's expression shifted to something almost sympathetic. You never asked. You were so convinced of human inferiority that it never occurred to you we might have adaptations you hadn't considered. She gestured to her blood-soaked uniform. We don't have redundant organs or natural armor or telepathic abilities. We have creativity, desperation, and a remarkable talent for turning our weaknesses into strengths. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the silent room. And a very, very long history of being underestimated. News of the Pod 23 incident spread through consortium space with the inevitability of a quantum entanglement cascade. Within 48 hours, every connected system had received some version of the story, each more exaggerated than the last. By the end of the week, rumors claimed that humans could regenerate entire limbs, survive direct exposure to vacuum, and possibly achieve immortality through sheer stubbornness. The Consortium Security Council convened an emergency session to address what many species were now calling the human deception. The humans, for their part, simply called it Tuesday. Vraxnor's fate was decided with the swift brutality typical of bureaucracies confronted with embarrassing publicity. Stripped of rank and credentials, he was reassigned to an outpost monitoring methane emissions on a gas giant in a system so distant it didn't even have an official designation, just a serial number. The Heshtari government publicly disavowed his actions while privately commending his initiative in testing human capabilities, a contradiction that surprised absolutely no one. The Academy implemented immediate policy changes. All training simulations were now supervised by representatives from at least 3 different species. Safety protocols received 17 new redundancy systems. Most tellingly, human cadets were reclassified from Category 2.7 to Category 4.9 on the biological resilience scale, just below shapeshifters and energy beings. I never thought I'd see the day when humans outranked Dronarch on any evolutionary scale, remarked a Pelrosi ambassador during closed-door negotiations. Perhaps we should reconsider their role in frontier exploration. The implications rippled through galactic politics like a stone dropped in a zero-gravity pond. Species that had previously dismissed humans as curiosities now sent diplomatic envoys to Earth. Trade agreements were hastily revised. Military alliances were reconsidered, in light of what one pundit called the microscopic armada hiding in every human capillary. Jamie herself became something of a reluctant celebrity. Offered prestigious positions throughout the consortium, she instead chose assignment to a Vanguard-class vessel, the first human to serve as tactical officer on an elite exploration ship. Her official file now included a notation that simply read, approach with appropriate caution and respect. Perhaps the most profound change came in the everyday interactions between humans and other species. The sidelong glances of pity transformed overnight into looks of cautious reassessment. Casual dismissals of human capabilities vanished from official reports. Instructors who had previously assigned humans to support roles now requested their input on combat strategies. "They're not actually afraid of us," one humid diplomat explained to an Earth journalist. "They're afraid of what else they might have missed. It's not about the nanites. It's about what else might be hiding in plain sight." The consortium's official response was predictably measured. A 97-page report acknowledging oversight in species capability assessment and recommending enhanced protocols for physiological evaluation. The unofficial response was far simpler and spread through every level of consortium society in whispered conversations. "Watch the humans. Watch them very carefully. And whatever you do, don't make them bleed." 3 standard galactic months after the Pod 23 incident, the Interstellar Defense Academy installed a new plaque at the entrance to Simulation Chamber 17. Unlike the ostentatious monuments celebrating the achievements of elder races, this one was small, easily overlooked, and inscribed with a single human phrase: "Assumptions are the mother of all mistakes." The consortium had existed for 12,000 years, spreading across 17 galactic arms, encountering hundreds of species and developing technological marvels that bordered on the miraculous. Yet somehow they had failed to learn the most fundamental lesson of evolutionary biology. Adaptation hides in plain sight, and necessity breeds innovation far more effectively than comfort ever could. Humans, those bizarre bipeds with their confusing idioms and their ridiculous tendency to survive things that should kill them instantly, had delivered that lesson in the most dramatic way possible, by bleeding all over it. The irony was exquisite. Administrator Zilvik's clerical error of unprecedented proportions in approving first contact about 3 centuries too early hadn't been an error at all. It had been precisely on time. Any earlier, and humans wouldn't have developed the nanite technology that now made them valuable allies. Any later, and they might have developed something far more concerning than defensive blood cells. As for Jamie, her service record would eventually include first contact with 11 previously unknown species, tactical innovations that rewrote Academy textbooks, and a peculiar note that she insisted be added to her official biography. Has never experienced a fatal injury. Not even once. The Galactic Consortium had standards, principles, and an absolutely insufferable superiority complex that had developed over roughly 12,000 years of interspecies cooperation. Now, they had something new, a healthy dose of humility, delivered in a package roughly 172 centimeters tall and still occasionally trailing droplets of blood that didn't behave quite the way blood should.